30 people watched my stepmother call me worthless at Thanksgiving. None of them knew I'd been paying her mortgage for 5 years. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 38, and this Thanksgiving changed everything. What started as forgotten pumpkin pie ended with federal charges and a complete family restructuring. The woman who raised me after Dad remarried discovered that humiliating me publicly would cost her more than just family relationships. It would cost her freedom. Before I share how one dinner dismantled years of financial abuse, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if stories about setting boundaries resonate with you. I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Let me take you back to that Thursday evening when everything I'd kept hidden finally came to light. The Rosewood Manor stood like a fortress of old money on Beacon Hill, its private dining room glowing with crystal chandeliers that Patricia had insisted on. 30 guests had already assembled when I rushed through the entrance at 6:10 p.m., my heels clicking against marble floors still wet from Boston's November rain. Patricia sat at the head of the table like royalty surveying her court. At 62, she maintained the kind of severe elegance that made other women feel underdressed. Her pearl necklace, my mother's pearls actually, caught the light as she turned to acknowledge my arrival with a practiced frown. "How considerate of you to finally join us, Sarah." Her voice carried perfectly across the room. A successful daughter would never keep her family waiting. The room fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Even the servers seemed to freeze. "Traffic on I-93 was backed up," I started, but she waved her hand dismissively. "Excuses, always excuses. James managed to arrive on time with his pregnant wife, didn't you, darling?" My half-brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His wife, Emma, touched his arm gently. A warning, perhaps, or comfort. They knew this dance. What the guests didn't know was that I'd left my office at one of Boston's Fortune 500 companies, where I served as chief accounting officer, racing here after approving Patricia's monthly expense report for the Mitchell Foundation. The same foundation my father had created to help underprivileged students, now Patricia's personal platform for social climbing. I took my assigned seat, notably distant from the family cluster, and noticed the place card. Sarah, in elegant script, no last name, as if I might be anyone, as if 5 years of financial support had earned me nothing more than a first-name basis in my own family. The evening had barely begun. 5 years ago, when Dad's heart gave out in his study, Patricia had worn widow's black for exactly 3 weeks. They'd been married only 2 years. A whirlwind romance that began at a charity gala and ended with her name on everything that mattered. "Your father would be so disappointed in you," she'd said at his funeral, studying my simple black dress with disapproval. Margaret would have known how to honor him properly. Margaret, my birth mother who'd died when I was 12. Patricia never missed a chance to invoke her ghost, despite having never met her. Since then, I'd quietly paid Patricia's way through life. The penthouse overlooking the common, my name on the lease, $4,500 monthly. Her health insurance after Dad's corporate coverage ended? $1,200 from my checking account. The country club dues, the car insurance, the maintenance fees, all flowing from my accounts while she maintained the illusion of inherited wealth. James didn't know. The relatives didn't know. Patricia had crafted a careful narrative, the grieving widow maintaining her husband's legacy, while his disappointment of a daughter fumbled through life unmarried and childless. The truth was simpler and uglier. Dad's estate had been smaller than expected, his investments hit hard by medical expenses. Patricia got the house and a modest trust. I got my mother's jewelry, which Patricia now wore, and my father's wish that I take care of the family. So I did. Every month, automatic transfers kept Patricia afloat while she presided over charity boards and society lunches, telling anyone who'd listen about the burden of managing the estate alone. I watched her now, laughing at something the mayor's wife had said, diamonds glittering at her throat. My diamonds, my mother's diamonds, bought with my father's first bonus at the company where I now worked. The weight of silence had become unbearable. "Now then," Patricia announced, tapping her wine glass with a silver spoon. Before we begin the meal properly, I must address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the absence of one. The guests looked around, confused. I felt my stomach drop. Our Sarah, she continued, her voice dripping with false concern, promised to bring her grandmother's famous pumpkin pie, the one tradition from my dear husband's family that we've maintained for 20 years. I opened my mouth to explain. The bakery had lost my order. I'd called 6 places trying to find a replacement, but Patricia was already in performance mode. Even this simple task is too much for her. She shook her head theatrically. I suppose when you reach 38 without accomplishing anything meaningful, even remembering a pie becomes overwhelming. Emma, James's wife, tried to interject. Patricia, it's just dessert. Just dessert, Patricia's eyes flashed. It's tradition, family legacy. But how could someone who refuses to create a family of her own understand that? The room grew uncomfortable. Senator Morrison's wife studied her water glass. The foundation board members exchanged glances. This wasn't the gracious society dinner they'd expected. James cleared his throat. Mom, please. It's Thanksgiving. Exactly why standards matter more. Patricia stood, raising her wineglass. Perhaps it's time we discuss the future of the Mitchell family assets. My hands found the napkin in my lap, twisting the linen between my fingers. Around us, 30 of Boston's most influential people waited to see what Patricia Foster Mitchell would do next. The crystal chandelier above seemed to dim. Or maybe that was my vision narrowing to the woman who'd taken everything my father built and twisted it into a weapon. She stood there, glass raised, ready to deliver another blow. I've been reviewing the family trust documents, Patricia announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. And I believe it's time to reconsider certain allocations. The foundation board members straightened in their chairs. Charles Worthington, the board treasurer, set down his fork. The Mitchell Foundation has $2 million in assets, Patricia continued, swirling her wine. My dear husband intended for those funds to benefit those who honor the family name, not those who diminish it. Patricia, Harold Bennett's voice came from the far end of the table. Dad's old friend, his lawyer for 20 years, watched her with careful eyes. This isn't the appropriate venue. When is it appropriate, Harold? When Sarah forgets another obligation, misses another deadline? Patricia's laugh was crystalline, sharp. Family assets should go to those who honor the family. I remembered Dad's words from his hospital bed, his hand weak in mine. Take care of them, Sarah. Family is everything, even when it's hard. But what happened when family became poison? James shifted in his seat, his hand finding Emma's. They were expecting their first child in 4 months. Patricia had already promised them the house in Wellesley, the one Dad had bought as an investment, the same house whose mortgage I'd been quietly paying. I propose, Patricia said, that we restructure the foundation's beneficiary list. Those who contribute nothing shouldn't benefit from everything. The threat was clear. Stay silent, keep paying, or lose not just money but my father's legacy. The scholarships, the programs, the students who depended on the Mitchell Foundation. Senator Morrison coughed politely. His wife touched her pearls. Everyone waited to see if Robert Mitchell's daughter would finally speak up or continue her role as the family doormat. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email, IHB. Harold Bennett hadn't looked at his phone once. Let's discuss what really matters, Patricia continued, her voice honeyed poison. Success, legacy, the things that define a Mitchell. She gestured toward James and Emma. Here we have the future, a growing family, a thriving medical practice, contributions to society. Her gaze swiveled to me. And there we have... what exactly? Patricia, please. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of the foundation board members, attempted to intervene. No, Elizabeth, this needs saying. Patricia's smile could have frozen champagne. What kind of woman reaches 38 without a family? Without a husband? without even a significant relationship to speak of? The room collectively held its breath. Emma's hand went to her belly protectively. My career, I started. Your career? Patricia laughed. Counting other people's money? How noble! Meanwhile, James is saving lives, Emma is creating life, and you're filing spreadsheets? Mom, that's enough, James said quietly, but Patricia was building to her crescendo. Your father wanted grandchildren. He wanted the Mitchell name to continue. Instead, his daughter spends her evenings alone in an office, growing older and more bitter by the day. Mrs. Morrison studied her salad with sudden intensity. The other guests found fascinating patterns in the tablecloth. Only Harold Bennett watched me directly, his phone in his hand now, typing something quickly. Perhaps, Patricia mused, this is why Robert never updated his will to include you more substantially. He knew. He saw what you'd become, or rather, what you'd never become. The lie sat between us like a loaded gun. Dad had updated his will. I knew because I'd driven him to Harold's office that day, waited in the lobby while he spent 3 hours inside. But Patricia controlled the narrative now, and 30 influential people were listening to her rewrite history. My phone lit up again. Harold's text. Say the word. Patricia raised her glass one final time, the crystal catching light like a blade. To family standards, she said, and to those who fail to meet them. The words that came next felt rehearsed, perfected through years of smaller cruelties. Sarah, you're the most useless woman I've ever met. The silence that followed was complete. Even the servers stopped moving. Emma gasped audibly. Charles Worthington's wine glass halted halfway to his lips. I felt 30 pairs of eyes on me, some sympathetic, others merely curious to see what Robert Mitchell's daughter would do when pushed this far. The weight of their attention pressed down like a physical thing. That's when I saw him. Harold Bennett had risen from his chair at the far end of the table, his silver hair catching the light as he moved toward us with the measured pace of a man who'd entered many courtrooms. In his hand, a leather portfolio I recognized, my father's, monogrammed RJM in gold. This was it. The moment where 5 years of silence could continue, or everything could change. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my untouched plate. My hands were steady. Years of presenting to boards had taught me to hide the trembling. The room seemed to expand and contract with my breathing. Patricia, I said, my voice carrying the same clarity I used when presenting quarterly reports to the board. We need to discuss who really pays for this lifestyle. Her face went white, then red. The pearls at her throat, my mother's pearls, trembled with her sudden intake of breath. James leaned forward. Emma grabbed his arm. The foundation board members exchanged quick glances. And Harold Bennett continued walking toward us, carrying secrets that would shatter Patricia's carefully constructed world. The chandelier above us swayed slightly, casting shifting shadows across the table. If you've ever been in a situation where your kindness was taken for granted, you'll understand what happens next. This story resonates with thousands who've faced family financial abuse. Please hit that like button if you believe in setting healthy boundaries, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let me show you how one revelation changed everything. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I opened the banking app I'd checked thousands of times over the past 5 years. Let's start with the basics, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. That penthouse you live in, Patricia? $4,500 a month, paid from my checking account every first of the month for 60 consecutive months. Patricia's hand went to her throat. How dare you? Your health insurance? $1,200 monthly. The country club membership you use to host these elaborate dinners? $800. The Mercedes lease? $650. Should I continue? Charles Worthington, the foundation treasurer, had pulled out his phone, apparently doing quick calculations. His eyebrows rose steadily. Every dollar is documented, Patricia. I scrolled through the transactions, the evidence of 5 years of silent support. Bank statements, canceled checks, Automatic transfer receipts, $342,000 over 5 years. This is inappropriate. Patricia's voice cracked, losing its polished edge. Family matters should remain. Family? I laughed, surprising myself with how calm it sounded. Is that what we are when you need money? Because 5 minutes ago, I was the most useless woman you'd ever met. Emma whispered something to James. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Senator Morrison cleared his throat. Patricia, is this true? She's lying. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This ungrateful child is trying to humiliate me. Harold Bennett had reached our end of the table. He stood quietly, waiting, the portfolio tucked under his arm like a weapon waiting to be deployed. I have every receipt, I continued, meeting the eyes of each board member. Every transfer, every payment. While Patricia told you all about managing the estate, I was the estate. The truth hung in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Patricia's mask finally cracked completely. You manipulative little... She caught herself, remembering the audience. This is what children do for their parents. It's called duty, responsibility. Is it? I kept my voice level. Because I don't recall you mentioning that duty when you told everyone at the club that you were supporting me. Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Morrison actually dropped her fork. She's twisting everything. Patricia turned to the crowd, playing to her audience. After everything I've done for her, raising her after her mother died, giving her a place in society. You met Dad when I was 25, I corrected. I was already working, already had my CPA. This is defamation! Patricia's voice rose to near shriek. I'll sue you for slander. Charles, you're witnessing this assault on my character. Charles Worthington looked deeply uncomfortable. Patricia, if what Sarah says is true, the foundation board needs to know. Of course it's not true. But her hands were shaking now, wine sloshing dangerously in her glass. James, tell them about your ungrateful sister. James stood slowly, Emma's hand on his arm. Mom, I need to know. Is Sarah paying your bills? The betrayal in Patricia's eyes was complete. You too? Just answer the question, James said quietly. I don't have to justify anything to any of you. Patricia's composure shattered entirely, especially not to her. Harold Bennett stepped forward then, his voice cutting through the chaos with courtroom precision. Perhaps I can help clarify matters. Patricia spun toward him, and I saw it, real fear flickering across her features. Harold, this doesn't concern you. I'm afraid it does, he said calmly. As executor of Robert Mitchell's estate, everything concerning the family assets concerns me. The room held its breath. Harold Bennett commanded the room with the quiet authority of 40 years in law. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your dinner, but certain matters have come to my attention that require immediate address. Harold, sit down, Patricia hissed. This is a family matter. Precisely why I must speak. He opened the leather portfolio with deliberate slowness. As Robert Mitchell's attorney and friend for 20 years, I have documents that everyone here needs to see. The foundation board members leaned forward. Even Senator Morrison had abandoned any pretense of disinterest. This is highly irregular, Patricia stammered, but her protest sounded weak. What's irregular, Harold continued, is a widow claiming poverty while living in luxury. What's irregular is a stepmother systematically isolating her stepdaughter while draining her financially. How dare you? I dare because Robert asked me to protect his daughter. Harold's eyes were steel. He worried about this exact situation. I felt my throat tighten. Dad had known. Somehow he'd known. James moved closer to the table. Mr. Bennett, what documents? Patience, James. First, I need everyone to understand that I've been conducting an investigation for the past 6 months. Sarah doesn't know this. He glanced at me apologetically. But your father left instructions. If certain conditions were met, I was to act. What conditions? Elizabeth Smith asked from the board table. Evidence of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, misuse of foundation funds. Harold's gaze fixed on Patricia. All three conditions have been met. Patricia's face had gone from red to white to an alarming gray. You have no right. I have every right. Your husband gave it to me. He pulled out a document. Shall we discuss what really happened to the Mitchell Foundation's missing funds? The room erupted in whispers. Harold held up a hand for silence. 1 month before his death, Robert asked me to meet him privately. He was concerned about what he called irregularities in the foundation's accounting. Patricia gripped the edge of the table. Robert was ill. He was confused. He was lucid enough to request a forensic audit. Harold produced another document. He was especially concerned about several large withdrawals that didn't match any documented charitable activities. Charles Worthington stood abruptly. Are you saying foundation funds were misappropriated? I'm saying Robert wanted answers. He also wanted to protect certain assets. Harold's gaze found mine. He knew Sarah would honor his wishes even at personal cost, so he made provisions. What provisions? James asked. That will become clear shortly, but first you should know that Robert created a new will 2 weeks before his death. A will with very specific conditions and protections. Patricia laughed, but it sounded forced. That's impossible. I have his will, filed with the court. Everything is— You have a will, Harold corrected. Not the final one. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the table edge, remembering that day Dad had asked me to drive him to Harold's office. He'd been so insistent, despite the pain medication making him drowsy. Robert was very specific about protecting certain assets, Harold continued. He wanted to ensure the Foundation's mission survived, regardless of personal conflicts. Elizabeth Smith spoke up. Harold, if there's been misuse of Foundation funds, we need to know immediately. You will. But first, I need to address the audit findings. He pulled out a thick folder. 3 years of systematic withdrawals. $200,000 unaccounted for. Someone gasped. Patricia swayed on her feet. That's preposterous, she managed. Harold's expression remained neutral. The forensic accountant would disagree. Harold pulled out a manila folder marked with red tabs. The forensic accountant found systematic withdrawals over 36 months, always just under $10,000, the federal reporting threshold. Charles Worthington had gone pale. That's structuring, that's a federal crime. Indeed. Harold's voice remained clinically calm. Each withdrawal was authorized with the same signature, each claimed as administrative expenses or event planning costs. We host dozens of events, Patricia protested, but her voice had lost all authority. Yes, you do, but when the accountant called the venues, caterers, and vendors listed on these expense reports, Harold paused, letting the weight build. 40% of them had never heard of the Mitchell Foundation. The room erupted. Board members pulled out phones. Senator Morrison pushed back from the table. This is a misunderstanding, Patricia said desperately. Bookkeeping errors. $200,000 in bookkeeping errors? Elizabeth Smith's voice was ice. Patricia, I'm the CFO of a biotech firm. This isn't an error. It's embezzlement. You can't prove anything. Patricia's mask had completely fallen away now, revealing something desperate and cornered. Actually, Harold said, producing another document, we can. Every withdrawal went to the same account. An account opened 3 years ago under the name P. Mitchell Consulting. An account that shows transfers to your personal accounts within days of each deposit. James stood frozen. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Patricia's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's. I deserve that money. I've run this foundation, attended every boring charity lunch, smiled at every donor, with Sarah paying your personal bills the entire time, Harold added quietly. 3 board members were now on their phones. I heard Elizabeth mention emergency board meeting and legal counsel. The walls were closing in on Patricia Foster Mitchell. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Dad had known. He'd spent his final week setting up safeguards, protecting what mattered most. Sarah, Harold turned to me, his expression softening. Your father wanted you to know he was proud of you. He saw everything, your sacrifices, your silence, your strength. My eyes burned with unshed tears. Around us, the dinner guests watched in stunned silence as years of deception unraveled. Patricia tried one last desperate move. "Security!" she called out. "Remove these people immediately." The Rosewood Manor's security chief appeared in the doorway but didn't advance. He looked to the restaurant manager, who happened to be looking at his phone with a concerned expression. "Mrs. Mitchell," the manager said carefully, "I've just received a call from the credit card company. Your card has been declined." Patricia's face went white. "That's impossible. Try another." "We've tried 3 cards, ma'am, all declined." I stood then, my voice steady. "I canceled the cards this afternoon, the ones I've been paying for 5 years. You can't—" "I can. They're in my name. You're just an authorized user." I met her gaze directly. "I was done being your ATM the moment you called me useless." James stepped forward, positioning himself between Patricia and me, but surprisingly, he faced her, not me. "Mom, what else haven't you told us?" Emma stood beside him, her hand protective over her belly. "We need the truth, all of it." Harold cleared his throat. "Then perhaps it's time to discuss Robert's actual will." He withdrew a sealed envelope from the portfolio, the kind used for legal documents. Patricia's legs seemed to give out. She sank into her chair. Everyone waited. The entire room held its breath for what would come next. Patricia's desperation exploded into rage. She grabbed her wineglass and threw it at Harold, red wine splashing across his suit jacket. "This is a conspiracy!" "Patricia!" James shouted, moving to restrain her. "Don't touch me!" She whirled on him. "You ungrateful child! After everything I've done for you!" "What have you done, Mom?" James's voice broke. "Besides lie to all of us?" Patricia turned to the room, appealing to the audience that had always been her strength. "You all know me. I've served this community for years. This ungrateful girl is trying to destroy me out of jealousy." "Jealousy?" I remained calm, though my heart was racing. "Of what exactly?" "Of my position. My marriage to your father. You never accepted me. I paid your bills for 5 years. That was your duty as a daughter." Senator Morrison stood. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think it's best if we—" "You're all against me," Patricia screamed. "Every one of you. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting to see Patricia Foster fall." The restaurant manager had quietly called for additional security. 2 uniformed guards appeared in the doorway. "This ungrateful brat," Patricia pointed at me, "has been planning this for years. She probably killed Robert to get his money." The room gasped collectively. Even I hadn't expected her to go that far. Harold's voice cut through like a blade. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'd be very careful about making accusations. Defamation is also actionable." "Sue me then," she laughed hysterically. "I have nothing left anyway, right? Sarah made sure of that." The security guards stepped closer. The restaurant manager looked mortified. "Ma'am," one guard said quietly, "we need you to calm down." Patricia's response was to sweep an entire place, setting off the table, china shattering on the floor. "You want to know about sacrifice?" Patricia stood on shaking legs, mascara running down her cheeks. "I gave up everything for this family." "What did you give up?" I asked quietly. "Your previous husband's money? The one who divorced you for fraud?" The room went silent. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Harold nodded slowly. "Yes, we know about Mr. Foster, and the settlement that required you to pay back $70,000. Money that mysteriously appeared right after you married Robert." "I gave Robert love!" Patricia shrieked. "I gave him companionship in his final years." "You gave him 2 years," I corrected. 2 years while you systematically isolated him from his friends, convinced him to change lawyers, until he secretly went back to Harold and tried to turn him against me. It wasn't hard. You were never here, always working, always too busy. I was working to pay your bills. The truth of it seemed to echo in the crystal and silver around us. Several guests were now recording on their phones. Patricia noticed and lunged for the nearest one. "Stop filming! This is private!" Mrs. Morrison pulled her phone back quickly. "This stopped being private when you started screaming, Patricia." "You're all vultures." Patricia spun in a circle, addressing the room. "You pretend to be my friends, but you're just waiting for scandal. Well, here it is. I took the money. I deserved it. I earned it by putting up with Robert's boring stories and his pathetic grief over his dead wife." James made a sound like he'd been punched. "Mom, stop." "Why? It's true. Your father was a shell of a man living in the past." "He was dying," I said quietly. "He had cancer. You knew that when you married him." The room absorbed this final piece of information with visible shock. Patricia's last shred of composure evaporated entirely. "Yes, I knew. So what? I gave a dying man comfort. I deserve compensation." "Compensation?" Elizabeth Smith stood, her board member authority evident. "You stole from a charity that helps underprivileged students. Those brats don't need it more than I do." Patricia's voice had gone shrill. "I'm the widow. I'm the one who's suffered." "Mrs. Mitchell," Harold said gravely, "you might want to sit down." "Don't tell me what to do." She grabbed a butter knife from the table, waving it erratically. "I'll destroy all of you. I have connections everywhere. Judges, politicians, police commissioners." "Actually," a new voice came from the doorway, "you really don't." Everyone turned. Two men in dark suits stood at the entrance, badges visible on their belts. "Detectives Morrison and Carr, Financial Crimes Division," the taller one said. "We received a call about potential wire fraud and embezzlement." Patricia dropped the knife. It clattered on the marble floor. "That was fast," someone whispered. Harold cleared his throat. "I may have alerted them this afternoon when the final audit report came in." "You planned this," Patricia accused, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You set me up." "No," I said quietly. "You set yourself up. I just stopped enabling it." The detectives moved into the room with practiced calm. "Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need you to come with us for questioning." "I'm not going anywhere!" But her protest was weak now, the fight draining out of her. James stepped forward. "Mom, please, just cooperate." Patricia looked at him, then at me, then at the room full of Boston's elite watching her complete destruction. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. "This isn't over," she whispered, but even she didn't seem to believe it. What Harold revealed next changed not just my life, but exposed years of criminal activity. If you're finding value in this story about standing up to financial abuse, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support through likes and comments helps these important stories reach those who need them most. Now, for the revelation that sent shockwaves through our entire community. Harold held up the sealed envelope, its edges worn from years in a safe. "Before the detectives proceed, this needs to be read. Robert's final will, dated 2 weeks before his death." "That's fake," Patricia protested weakly. "Notarized, witnessed, and filed with my office." Harold broke the seal. "Robert Mitchell's last will and testament, superseding all previous versions." The room fell silent except for the soft rustle of paper. "To my daughter, Sarah Margaret Mitchell," Harold read, his voice carrying clearly. "I leave 60% of my estate, including all investment accounts, the commercial property portfolio, and controlling interest in the Mitchell Foundation." I sank into my chair, overwhelmed. Harold continued. "To my wife, Patricia Foster Mitchell, I leave the right to reside in the family home for 2 years following my death, after which the property transfers to Sarah. I also leave Patricia the sum of $50,000, contingent upon a clean audit of the Mitchell Foundation's finances." "No!" Patricia's wail was primal. "Furthermore," Harold read on, Should any financial irregularities be discovered in the Foundation's management, all bequests to Patricia Foster Mitchell are null and void, and she must repay any misappropriated funds with interest. Charles Worthington whistled low. He knew. To my son James, Harold continued, I leave 40% of my remaining estate and my medical practice holdings, knowing he will continue our family's tradition of healing. James nodded, tears streaming down his face. Finally, Harold's voice grew heavier. I name Sarah Mitchell as executor of my estate and permanent chair of the Mitchell Foundation, with full authority to investigate and correct any mismanagement that occurred during my illness. Patricia had crumpled completely, sobbing into her hands. Your father signed this in my office, Harold said to me gently, with 2 witnesses. He said, protect my daughter. She's the only one who truly loved me. Detective Morrison stepped forward, a tablet in his hand. Mr. Bennett provided us with the forensic audit this afternoon. Mrs. Mitchell, you're being investigated for wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Forgery? James asked, stunned. The detective nodded. 3 years of forged signatures on foundation checks. The handwriting expert confirmed it. They don't match Robert Mitchell's actual signature from the same period. Harold produced another document. The audit is comprehensive. $200,000 diverted over 3 years, fake vendor payments to shell companies, transfers to personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands? Elizabeth Smith looked appalled. Patricia, that's money laundering. Each transaction under $10,000, Detective Carr added. Classic structuring to avoid federal reporting. That alone is a felony. Patricia lifted her tear-stained face. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Morrison said. But you should know, the FBI has been notified. This crosses state lines. The weight of it crashed over the room. This wasn't just family drama anymore, it was federal crime. Charles Worthington stood. As treasurer, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Patricia, you're immediately suspended from all foundation activities. You can't. We can, and we are. Elizabeth's voice was steel. The board votes now. All in favor of Patricia's immediate removal? Every board member's hand went up. Sarah, Charles turned to me, would you accept an interim appointment as foundation president? I looked at Harold, who nodded encouragingly. Yes. All in favor? Again unanimous. Patricia watched her world crumble in real time. This is theft. You're stealing from me. No, Detective Morrison said quietly. You stole from them. From those students. From your husband's legacy. We have the evidence, dates, amounts, account numbers. Your own bank provided the records. The reality of prison finally seemed to hit Patricia. She went white as paper. I stood and walked to where Patricia sat crumpled in her chair. The room watched as I knelt beside her, speaking quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. I'm done being your ATM, Patricia. Done enabling your lies. Done sacrificing my life for someone who never saw my worth. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I made you strong. No, you made me silent. There's a difference. I stood, smoothing my dress. Dad knew what you were. That's why he protected the foundation, protected me. He saw through you. You poisoned him against me. I never said a word against you. Not once in 5 years. I pulled out my phone, showing my banking app. But every month I paid your way. While you told everyone I was worthless, I kept you afloat. James approached us, Emma beside him. Sarah's right, Mom. You used all of us. Me as the golden child to hurt her. Her as the scapegoat to control me. James, not you too. Yes, me too. His voice was firm. I'm done playing these games. Sarah, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you years ago. Emma added quietly. We won't let our child grow up in this toxicity. Patricia looked around wildly for any ally, any support. She found none. 30 of Boston's most influential people had witnessed her complete unmasking. "Detective Morrison," I said, "what happens now?" "Your stepmother needs to come with us for formal questioning. She's not under arrest yet, but she will need to surrender her passport." "This is kidnapping!" Patricia shrieked. "This is consequence," I replied calmly. "Something you've avoided for far too long." The detectives helped Patricia to her feet. She looked small suddenly, diminished. All her power evaporated in the span of one dinner. Detective Morrison spoke formally. "Mrs. Patricia Foster Mitchell, you're being detained for questioning regarding allegations of wire fraud, embezzlement, and financial structuring. You have the right to remain silent." "This is a mistake," Patricia mumbled, but the fight had left her. "Ma'am, we'll also need you to surrender your passport. Judge's orders, you're considered a flight risk given the offshore accounts." Harold produced a document. "This is a federal asset freeze order. All accounts under investigation are now frozen pending the outcome of the investigation." "How will I live?" Patricia's voice was small, defeated. "The same way I would have if I'd kept enabling you," I said. "Figure it out." Detective Carr looked at the room. "We'll need statements from the board members. Mr. Worthington, Mrs. Smith, can you come to the station tomorrow?" Both nodded. The other board members exchanged grim looks. This would be news by morning. "Sarah," Detective Morrison turned to me, "we'll need your financial records. Every payment, every transfer. I have everything organized by date and category. 5 years of documentation." I pulled out a flash drive from my purse. I'd been carrying it for months, waiting. Bank statements, canceled checks, receipts. James stared at me. "You've been preparing for this." "I've been hoping I'd never need it. But yes, I kept everything." The restaurant manager approached nervously. "About the bill for tonight?" "I'll handle it," I said, then looked at Patricia. "One last time, I'll pay. Consider it severance for 5 years of emotional labor." Patricia was led toward the door, the detectives flanking her. At the threshold, she turned back. "Your father would be ashamed," she said to me. Harold spoke up. "Actually, Robert would be proud. He knew exactly who Sarah was. That's why he protected her." As the detectives led Patricia away, the room seemed to exhale collectively. James approached me, his face etched with remorse. "Sarah, He struggled for words. "I was blind. Willfully blind." "You were manipulated," I said. "We both were." "No, you saw through it. You just chose to protect everyone anyway." He ran a hand through his hair, so like Dad's gesture. "All those times she compared us, made me the golden child. I let it happen. I enjoyed it." Emma touched his arm gently. "We all did what we thought was right with the information we had." "But I had information," James insisted. "I saw her credit cards getting declined. I noticed she never actually paid for anything. I just didn't want to know." I felt years of resentment beginning to soften. "She's our mother, James. Your biological mother. It's harder for you." "She's not my mother," he said firmly. "A mother doesn't destroy one child to control another. Mom died when I was 8. Patricia is just someone Dad married." The room was slowly returning to normal. Servers cleaned up broken glass. Guests murmured in small groups. Several approached me with quiet words of support. Senator Morrison shook my hand. "Your father would be proud. It takes courage to stand up to family." "Or desperation," I admitted. Elizabeth Smith joined us. "Sarah, the foundation needs steady leadership. Will you really take this on?" "Yes. Dad built it to help students who couldn't afford education. That's what it'll do again." Charles Worthington added, "We'll need a full forensic review. Every transaction for 5 years." "Do it," I said. "Transparency from day one. No more secrets." James stepped closer. "I want to help. However you need. I owe you that much." "You don't owe me anything. I owe you 5 years of silence while you carried our family." The board reconvened at a cleared table. The remnants of Thanksgiving dinner pushed aside for urgent business. Charles Worthington called us to order with a coffee spoon against his water glass. Motion to formally appoint Sarah Mitchell as president of the Mitchell Foundation, effective immediately. Seconded, Elizabeth said quickly. All in favor? Every hand rose without hesitation. Motion carries. Charles turned to me. Sarah, the foundation is yours to rebuild. I stood, feeling the weight of responsibility but also, surprisingly, ready for it. First priority, full forensic audit by an independent firm, not just the missing funds, everything, every donation, every expense, every scholarship. That'll be expensive, someone noted. Transparency is worth it. Second, new controls, 2 signatures on every check over $500, monthly board reviews, quarterly public reports. Elizabeth nodded approvingly. What about the scholarships? We honor every existing commitment, then expand. Dad wanted to help first-generation college students. That's what we'll do. The donors who left because of Patricia? Charles asked. I'll call each one personally, explain what happened, show them the audit. If they see we're serious about reform, they'll come back. Harold spoke up. Robert left detailed notes about his vision. I'll share everything with the board. What about the gala next month? A board member asked. Patricia was organizing. We scale it back. Make it about the students, not the society pages. Invite scholarship recipients to speak. Show where the money actually goes. James raised his hand. I'd like to establish a medical scholarship in Dad's name. Full ride for pre-med students. That's generous, James. It's right and overdue. The board worked for another hour, establishing protocols, assigning tasks. The Mitchell Foundation would survive, but transformed, transparent, ethical, focused on its actual mission. Finally, what Patricia had built on performance would be rebuilt on principle. By morning, the story had exploded across Boston society. Charity scandal. Mitchell Foundation matriarch arrested. Ran on the front page of the Globe's Metro section. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. I'd turned it off after the 50th call. James forwarded me screenshots from social media. The video from dinner, someone had filmed Patricia's meltdown, had gone viral. Woman embezzles from dead husband's charity, stepdaughter exposes her at Thanksgiving, had 3 million views. The country club had already sent Patricia a formal letter rescinding her membership. The Museum of Fine Arts removed her from their gala committee. The Ladies' Auxiliary expelled her within hours. It's brutal, James said over coffee at my apartment. Complete social annihilation. She built her entire identity on those positions. Built it on lies, Emma corrected. The foundation was her credibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. 3 donors want to meet. They're interested in returning. Then another from Charles. Journal wants to interview you about nonprofit transparency. You're going to be busy, James observed. Better than being silent. That afternoon, more truth emerged. Patricia's hairdresser called. She was owed $3,000. Her personal trainer, $2,000. The boutique where she bought her gowns, $15,000 in unpaid bills. She was drowning, Harold told me over the phone. Living entirely on credit and your payments. The house is mortgaged 3 times. Dad's house? She forged his signature on the loan documents. That's another federal charge. Each revelation felt like another weight lifting. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I'd been systematically drained by someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account. The public vindication was overwhelming. But more importantly, the truth was finally, completely, in the open. 6 months later, I sat in federal court as Patricia entered her plea. Guilty, she said to each charge. 5 counts total: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, structuring, and forgery. The prosecutor had been thorough. They'd found 3 more victims, elderly men Patricia had befriended at charity events, convincing them to donate to fake causes. Another $100,000 stolen over the years. The defendant systematically defrauded multiple victims, the prosecutor stated. She showed no remorse until caught. Patricia's lawyer argued for leniency, first offense, elderly woman, health issues. But the judge had reviewed everything. Mrs. Foster Mitchell, you betrayed the trust of a dying man. You stole from students who needed education. You emotionally abused your stepdaughter while taking her money. This wasn't desperation, it was greed. The sentence: 18 months in federal prison, 5 years probation, restitution of $200,000 to the foundation, plus $50,000 in fines. Patricia sobbed as they led her away in handcuffs. She looked at me once, no apology, just rage that I'd finally fought back. James sat beside me through it all. You okay? I'm free, I said, and meant it. Later, Harold showed me one more document, a letter from Dad, written days before he died. My dearest Sarah, it read, if you're reading this, you've finally stopped carrying everyone else. I'm proud of you. You were always the strongest of us, strong enough to be kind, even when it cost you everything. The foundation is yours now. Make it what it should be. Love, Dad. The paper was tear-stained before I finished reading. He knew you'd need to hear that, Harold said gently. Patricia would serve 11 months with good behavior, but the real sentence was losing everything she'd built on lies: status, wealth, respect, family. Justice had been surprisingly thorough. Patricia emerged from federal prison 11 months later to a world that had moved on without her. The penthouse was gone, I'd stopped paying, and she couldn't afford it. Her belongings had been moved to a small apartment in Revere, 40 minutes from the Boston society she'd once ruled. James had found her a job through a friend, receptionist at a medical billing company, minimum wage plus commission. She had to take the bus to work. I saw her at the grocery store, Emma told me one afternoon. She was buying generic brands, counting coupons. Did she see you? Yes. She turned and walked the other way. The woman who'd worn designer gowns to charity galas now wore polyester uniforms. The hands that had waved dismissively at waitstaff now answered phones for 8 hours a day. Her former friends had vanished completely. Mrs. Morrison had actually crossed the street to avoid her. The country club crowd pretended she'd never existed. But perhaps the cruelest irony was this: I still sent her money. $200 a month to her commissary account in prison, now $200 to help with groceries. Not because she deserved it, but because Dad would have wanted me to. She never acknowledged it. No thank you, no recognition. But she cashed every check. James visited her once. She's broken, he reported. Keeps talking about how unfair it all is, how she was the real victim. No accountability? None. In her mind, you destroyed her life out of jealousy. It didn't matter anymore. Patricia had become what she'd always accused me of being: irrelevant. A cautionary tale whispered about at charity luncheons. The woman who had everything and lost it all because she couldn't stop taking. Her fall from grace was complete and entirely self-inflicted. 2 years after that Thanksgiving, I barely recognized myself. Therapy had been transformative. Dr. Chen, a specialist in family financial abuse, helped me understand the patterns I'd been trapped in. You were trained to be supply, she explained during one session. Your father, meaning well, taught you that love meant sacrifice. Patricia exploited that training. Learning to say no had been physically uncomfortable at first. My body would tense, my stomach would churn, but each boundary I set made the next one easier. I can't cover your rent increase, I told a cousin who'd somehow heard I'd inherited money. That doesn't work for me, I said to a board member who wanted meetings at unreasonable hours. No became my most powerful vocabulary word. The changes showed everywhere. I'd moved from my cramped apartment to a condo with actual sunlight. I'd started dating, nothing serious yet, but I was learning what healthy relationships looked like. I'd even taken a vacation, something I'd never done in 5 years of funding Patricia's lifestyle. James and I had rebuilt our relationship from scratch. Weekly dinners, honest conversations, sharing memories of Dad that Patricia had tried to taint. You know what I realized? He said one evening. You were protecting me too. If you'd fought back earlier, she would have made me choose sides. You would have chosen her. Probably. And I would have lost you completely. He raised his beer. To patient sisters and slow-learning brothers. The Mitchell Foundation had tripled its scholarship recipients. We'd implemented every transparency measure I'd promised. Donors had not just returned, they'd increased their commitments. But the biggest change was internal. I no longer felt guilty for existing. I took up space. I had opinions. I mattered. Not because I paid for things, but because I was worthy of respect. Patricia had called me useless. I'd proven her wrong by becoming myself. The Mitchell Foundation's annual gala looked nothing like Patricia's productions. No ice sculptures, no celebrity performers, no 7-course meals. Instead, we'd filled the hall with success stories. Because of this scholarship, I'm the first in my family to graduate college, Maria Santos told the crowd. My parents clean offices. Now I'm headed to medical school. 50 students had received full scholarships in our first year under new management. Each one had a story that reminded me why Dad started the foundation. Your transparency reports are being used as a model, Elizabeth told me. 3 other foundations have adopted your protocols. The Boston Globe had run a feature, From Scandal to Standard, How the Mitchell Foundation Rebuilt Trust. They'd interviewed donors, students, board members. Everyone praised the turnaround. But the most unexpected development was my speaking career. Organizations started inviting me to discuss financial abuse, toxic family dynamics, and the importance of boundaries. Your story gives people permission to protect themselves, one organizer explained. The book had been Harold's idea. Working title: The Cost of Silence, a memoir of financial abuse. Publishers were interested. Will Patricia sue? James asked when I told him. Let her try. Everything in it is documented. He'd established the Robert Mitchell Medical Scholarship as promised. 3 students fully funded through medical school. At the gala, he spoke about Dad's vision for helping others heal. My father believed in second chances and fresh starts, James said. This foundation is proof that from the ashes of betrayal, something better can grow. Later, Harold pulled me aside. He'd found something in Dad's papers, architectural plans for a community center. Robert dreamed of this, a place where students could study, get tutoring, access resources. Then we'll build it, I said. The Robert and Margaret Mitchell Learning Center. Patricia had tried to steal a legacy. Instead, she'd catalyzed its transformation into something far greater. 3 years post-Thanksgiving, I stood in the garden at Dad's house, my house now. Patricia's probation officer had called. She'd been released early for good behavior but was struggling. She's not your responsibility, James reminded me when I told him. I know, but I can choose compassion without choosing vulnerability. I'd set up a trust that paid her rent directly to the landlord. She couldn't access the cash. Basic survival, nothing more. Dad would have wanted that much. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving access to hurt you again, Dr. Chen had taught me. I'd forgiven Patricia, but she'd never again have power over me. The investigation had revealed more than just theft. Patricia had been married 4 times, each husband wealthy, each marriage ending with financial disputes. She was a professional predator who'd finally met consequences. Yet understanding her pattern helped me release the personal sting. I wasn't special to her cruelty. I was just convenient supply. She called me, James said one evening, wanted to reconcile. What did you say? That reconciliation requires accountability. She hung up. We'd learned Patricia was working at a call center now, selling insurance. The woman who'd once commanded Boston society was cold-calling strangers for commission. Karma had been thorough. But I'd stopped tracking her downfall. My energy went toward building, not watching others crumble. The foundation had just announced its biggest initiative, full scholarships for 25 first-generation students, plus mentoring, tutoring, and mental health support. Real help, not just money. Dad would be so proud, James said when we unveiled the program. He'd be proud of both of us. We broke the cycle. Patricia had taught me something valuable: the difference between kindness and enabling, between family and manipulation, between sacrifice and self-destruction. They were lessons worth the tuition I'd paid in tears and dollars. If you're reading this because someone in your family treats you like an ATM, I need you to hear something. You deserve respect. Your kindness should never be someone's credit card. Document everything. Every payment, every loan, every guilt trip that ends with you opening your wallet. Not because you're planning revenge, but because gaslighting thrives in ambiguity. When they say you've never helped, you'll have receipts. Seek legal help. Financial abuse is real abuse. There are lawyers who specialize in family financial exploitation. Many offer free consultations. Use them. Find a therapist who understands family financial abuse. Not all do. The right one won't tell you to just say no. They'll help you understand why saying no feels impossible and teach you how to make it possible. It's not selfish to protect yourself. This took me years to learn. Self-preservation isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't punishment. You're not responsible for managing other adults' lives. The guilt will be overwhelming at first. When I stopped paying Patricia's bills, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up panicked, convinced I was a terrible person. But guilt is just withdrawal from a toxic dynamic. It passes. Your family might turn against you. Some of mine did. Cousins called me heartless. Aunts said I'd changed. They were right. I had changed. I'd stopped being supply. But here's what they don't tell you. On the other side of that loss is freedom. Real relationships emerge. People who love you for you, not your usefulness, will find you. You might discover, as I did, that the person you were protecting everyone from was yourself. Your power, your voice, your ability to say enough. Start small. One boundary, one no, one moment of choosing yourself. You're stronger than you know, and you're worth more than what you can provide. This Thanksgiving will be different. James and Emma are hosting, their daughter Sophie, now 3 years old and full of opinions about turkey. We'll eat at a normal hour, at a regular table, with people who actually like each other. There won't be any power plays disguised as toasts. No one will keep score of who brought what. No one will be humiliated for entertainment. Just family, the kind we chose to become after the one we were born into imploded. Patricia won't be there, obviously. Last I heard, she was spending holidays alone in her apartment, maintaining her victim narrative to anyone who'll listen. But fewer people listen each year. The Mitchell Foundation continues to grow. We've helped over 100 students now. Some have graduated, gotten jobs, started lifting their own families out of poverty. That's the legacy Dad wanted, not Patricia's performances, but real change. I still have the letter Dad wrote me. I read it sometimes when doubt creeps in. You were always the strongest of us, strong enough to be kind, even when it cost you everything. But here's what I've learned. Kindness shouldn't cost everything. It shouldn't drain you dry. Real kindness has boundaries. It says, I'll help you, but not at my own destruction. That Thanksgiving 3 years ago, Patricia called me useless. It was the greatest gift she ever gave me. In trying to destroy me publicly, she freed me completely. Sometimes the worst moments become the best turning points. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with family about money? What was your turning point? Your stories help others realize they're not alone. Please subscribe for more content about surviving family financial abuse and rebuilding with dignity. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Until next time, stay strong and know your worth.